it's a symptom. It's like you have this vision that's what you want to achieve and you feel like you can get more of the upsides. You want to do it. But it's not like the control of like, I want to be able to work whenever I want. I want to be able to have all that freedom, or I want to work less. Like ultimately you're going to work more. It's going to be harder work. It's going to be like, everything's going to be more difficult.
Welcome to Made Locally, the podcast for people building real businesses in the real world. I'm Rajul Jaswa, and on this show, I interview the entrepreneurs that have built thriving local businesses to uncover how they attracted customers, built strong brands, and grew rapidly and sustainably. You'll hear from operators, founders, and experts sharing what's actually working across marketing, operations, and technology. No fluff, just practical insights you can use today. All right, well, welcome, Jean-Michel. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I've heard so much about you. I heard you have a long and storied history, kind of building both an in-home mobile beauty business, but then also creating a software platform enabling entrepreneurs in the mobile beauty space. And so it seems like, you really know what it means to make something locally. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say and learn some of the tips and tricks that maybe you could share with some of our listeners.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here. So maybe to give you a bit more about my background. So I studied business in France and then in London. And I was kind of on a different trajectory. So I went for consulting after graduating. So you get like kind of the good salary, the nice car, the penthouse flat. And I went for kind of that. And on paper, I had like the perfect life. But internally, I was quite miserable because I wasn't really doing something that mattered to me and I could feel it. So that's when I decided to leave consulting and start my first business, LeSalon, which was a marketplace connecting mobile beauty professionals with customers. And the idea and what I'm always really passionate about is empowering people, solopreneurs, to work in their own terms, to work the way they want. So we kind of grew this into one of London's leading at-home beauty service. I got like Forbes 30 under 30. I mean, obviously I'm way above 30 now. We got millions in revenue. Like we did the whole thing. We then sold the business as well to like an American company. But I think while I was running the business, there was always something that was nagging me. My goal is to give pros the freedom. But I think that in reality, what kind of happened is that we became just one of the other platforms where we just take a cut and control their clients. And that's not really kind of the relationship I was going for. Because what I saw they needed is really kind of tools and empowerment to help them run their business independently in their own way. So when I was doing kind of LeSalon, I met this professional, and that's how it kind of happened. Like I met this pro called Christine, and she was running her entire business across like 5 different apps. So she had like us for clients, another app. She was an expense app, a travel app, a parking app, payments app, everything like kind of all stitched together. And I watched her like kind of use this, and I was like pretty amazed. Like, wow, this is completely crazy. Like we could definitely help you build this and automate this. This feels like, way more complicated than it needs to be. So that's how kind of the idea of Jena came together. And at the same time, like we kind of saw like on the platform, a lot of the users that we had, we built like quite a good like kind of back end side of the business. And we saw a lot of people just using that for their personal clients. So I think that's kind of how they really kind of came together. And we created Jena, which is now the business I'm running, which is the whole idea is to give you everything you need to run your business as a solo business owner. So you get a website, you get a booking system, payments, everything you need. And it's a flat monthly fee. So there's no commissions, which is something that I felt very strongly about. No percentage cuts. And it's very transparent pricing. So they know exactly what they get and they really get kind of all the tools that they need to run their business. And the vision is that's the mission, right? Helping solo beauty pros, hair and beauty pros build sustainable businesses without getting ripped off by like kind of other software.
Cool. Yeah, super interesting. So I'd love to dig in a bit more into sort of the origin story of LeSalon and how it kind of transformed that particular industry, and then how you sort of migrated into more of a technology vendor. So with LeSalon, did that kind of come from some insight that you had into the market? Did you have some previous experience in the beauty industry or some personal need that you felt was unmet? How did you kind of end up going down this path?
Yeah, completely. So I think it happened like during my consulting years. I mean, when you're in consulting, like you do work quite a lot and you don't have a lot of time. And especially in Germany, like personal services like have very limited operating hours. And I could literally just never get like a haircut, like as simple as that. Because I was always working like, the times they were open, so 9 to 6. And then on the weekend, they would close on Sundays. So then I was like, well, I actually can't access this. So that's when I started thinking about like, it would be nicer if we could just have something an app, like I order my food, I could get like a service coming. And I think it was also that time when you had a lot of marketplace businesses being built. And it felt like marketplace, you could do anything with a marketplace, which obviously we know now in hindsight, that's maybe not the case. But I felt like that was something that felt very natural. So that's why we went down that route and we started a little MVP, started testing it, got really good reception from the customers. And that's how we started kind of building it.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so, in the US, we have these businesses like Glam Squad and Priv and stuff like that. Is this sort of the European counterpart to those companies, or are there differences?
It's the London way.
The London way.
Let's do it.
Okay, got it. And so when you started the business, what kind of resources did you have? Did you raise money right off the bat? Did you have a team? Did you have a network of beauty professionals who you felt like you could call on? Or what was the very beginning point?
I mean, not at all. Like,
yeah, nothing.
The beginning point was, I had nothing. Like I started.
Cool.
Yeah. I remember like I was trying to find like a technical co-founder, because at the time, like you couldn't actually vibe code the product. So you needed a proper developer to do it. So I essentially like tried to find people, work with them. And it was quite laborious. Like I never kind of found the right fit. And then I found my co-founder. So that was like where it changed. But like for a long time, we operated with like a landing page where you had like a booking form that you would fill, and I would match the bookings in the backends with like a spreadsheet, and then phone numbers to the users. So that's how we did like a lot of it in the early days.
Super interesting. I mean, one of the things that we're building here in terms of community is really people who have started these types of businesses. So people who have kind of built salons and beauty businesses and wellness businesses and restaurants from the ground up. And so, the interesting thing about LeSalon is that it's a marketplace, and, you built a whole technology platform, but also you really built a local business at the same time, right? You had to acquire customers. You had to acquire customers all over London, and you had to acquire beauty professionals, similar to how if you were starting a brick and mortar beauty chain or a beauty business, you'd have to hire hairdressers and you'd have to acquire customers. So you kind of went through that whole journey from zero to something, and so, I feel like when I talk to a lot of business owners, this part of the journey is the one where it feels the most like they're wandering in the dark. How do I get my first 100 customers? How do I get my first 200 customers? I think people feel as though once they have, some critical mass and momentum, there's a lot more to work with. You kind of reach out to your customers and you build retention systems and you kind of have money to be able to reinvest into marketing. But when you just kind of have nothing, I feel like there isn't a lot of good information out there or people who kind of share a lot about how they kind of cracked that initial nut. So I'd love to hear, how you did it. Like, where did your first customer come from? Where did your first 10 come from?
That's a really good question. So how did we do this initially? Such a long time ago. Let me remember. I mean, obviously, your first customers are your friends and family. That's usually how it happens. So you kind of force them to use your service. You get it to like kind of going. I remember with my co-founder at the time, so we were two co-founders, both non-technical. And then we had the third co-founder join us along the way to build the product. And when he was not there, what we did is, on top of just doing everything manually, we started building a little team of professionals. So we started with the supply side, because obviously with the marketplace, you have like the two-sided problem. And as a local business, you probably have the same thing. So we start with the supply side, make sure that we had supply before we went out to the market. That's the first thing. Then what we did is we asked our friends and family, started to get a few customers in word of mouth. But particularly what worked for us is we did a bit of like Google ads. At the time, Google ads were like really effective. Like you could get people searching. I mean, it still works, but like it's a bit different now. But we started with Google ads directing to our page, and that's how we grew initially and got like quite a lot of customers.
Wow. Okay. And so for the Google ads, is that something that you set up yourself, or did you kind of work with an agency or some other third party that helped you with it?
I mean, we tried a bit of everything, if I'm completely honest with you. Like we tried to work with an agency, it didn't really work. I tried to do it myself, but I didn't have the time. I had and then I had a friend actually who I met in Argentina, and he moved to London at the time, and he started helping me with the ads. And then I had another friend come in that was an expert at this, and he started like really kind of scaling the account. So this is kind of how it went
How it built
gradually.
up. Cool.
Yeah. So initially it was really kind of me figuring it out and trying to pay someone to do it, but usually it doesn't work. So what my learning here is you're always better off like kind of learning how to do it yourself initially so that you understand it, even though you're not the expert. Like as a founder, you always figure it out. And then once you get like kind of the messages right and you get the setup right, then you can start outsourcing, but only then.
Yeah, makes sense. And then with Jena, a lot of your customers must be entrepreneurs who are really like beauty professionals. Like maybe they worked in a salon and then they decided to go off on their own and build their own business and their own brand. What would you recommend to them? Like if they're just getting started from the beginning, I mean, obviously they got to buy Jena. That we all know that's a necessary ingredient in their success. But what are some of the things that they would do in terms of drumming up business and finding people, especially, if they don't have an existing roster of clients that they can reach out to try and bring?
Yes. So I've seen that happen over and over again. And I think the ones that are successful, they will do a few things. Usually they have a vision of where they want to be and they plan backwards. So what I always recommend is like, make sure you have the systems in place so you can actually handle more demands. So you don't spend a lot of time doing admin and you actually spend most of your time marketing. That's the first thing you want to do. So systems is like obviously Jena, like booking system, website, make sure you have a good presence, make sure you have like the payments automated, communication automated, all of that is now done and you don't need to worry about it. That's the first thing. Then the way I would get clients is I would do a few different things. I would do a model call. So if I had like a little bit of budget, I would be like, I'm going to do a model call in local groups. So that means that I will say, I'm looking for models for my new business. I'm going to get a photographer, or I try to take pictures myself. And I get those customers free services. I take pictures in every way and I create like a lot of assets that I can then repurpose for my business on social media and on all the different channels I'm going to be using. Usually those models also can become your customers. That's what I've seen a lot. They become your customers and then they start referring you to their friends. That's usually how it works. So I find like the model call is a really good way to solve the cold start problem.
That's a good grassroots solution.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would do is I would then go to every local business that I know of and every local group. What I found is that the ones who are very successful, they would go into local groups, Facebook groups, actually, funny enough, or sometimes next door as well, and post. Like some groups will allow you to post like a promotion every week or something like this. Go in there and post for yourself. Reply to requests. Some people were like, do you know any good nail tech? Reply to that. And so much happens in Facebook groups still. And I think this is a great way to get customers. So that's like the second thing I would do. And then the last thing, so you have like model calls, you do Facebook groups. But obviously, like I think like posting regularly is something that you need to do anyway to bring your brand out. But that was not the one. But I think like those two are probably kind of good ways to get started.
Yeah, that's really cool. So the first one is really, you go out into these groups and you post a model call. And a lot of the time, those models end up becoming customers. And, presumably the types of people who want to be models, they post on social media, they've got tight friend circles. And so it becomes a really good way to get the word of mouth going. That's awesome.
Yeah, they don't even need to be like famous. Like you can take like like a person that has just nice hands if you're nail tech, or someone who has nice hair if you're like hairdresser. Someone who would do good for your pictures, right?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Okay. And then the second is that there are tons and tons of these groups online, mom groups, parent-teacher associations, local community groups. And, it sounds a little kind of manual, but you can really just go in there and get the word out there, and you'll probably pick up some people along the way, and then that also kind of kickstarts the word of mouth effect.
And then the last one I just remembered. So essentially, the other thing I've seen work really, really well is you find a local celebrity or a local. So one example I have is like this girl. She gets all her customers to this channel, which is like she had this local Instagram account, which was what to do in her city. And that account had like, I think 10,000 followers or 20,000 followers. Not that much,
but they're hyper
They were just
local.
documenting.
Yeah.
Yeah, hyper local. They're documenting like the restaurants, the bars to go to, the parks to walk, and the nail tech to go to. She got fully booked. She did like a free treatment, I think a couple of times, and she's now fully booked back to back. She's increasing her prices all the time. Like it's working perfectly for her. So if you can find someone like this, obviously like it's not always like easy to find. So like, I think like start with the model call, start with the local groups, and then actually what's going to happen is probably that person's going to reach out to you.
Yeah. Super cool. I love it. These are very practical tips that can help somebody in that like phase where they just don't even know what to do next. You know, they're just sort of Googling, how do I get customers? And there's really not good answers. So, okay, fascinating. And at what point would you say that it really matters for someone to kind of switch from these more manual, grassroots, kind of community-based strategies to doing digital marketing and these kind of more bigger scale strategies that cost money and are more transactional?
So I think the moment where you switch is, I think when you start, instead of building a business about, how to say this, when you start scaling, I think like when you start really scaling, like you need to start thinking about those channels. For me, when you're like self-employed, so we work mostly with self-employed, you probably never reach that point. Like you can get fully booked with those methods like very, very easily. And then you get customers to come back. If you start building like a salon chain, or like you have like a salon with like 10 hairdressers that you need to fill, like you have chairs that are sitting empty, and then you start thinking about the marketing that you're going to do. And the way I would approach this, I would still approach it very similarly, is I would look at who are my customers? Can I get some like authentic, organic content? I've seen like a lot of hairdressers do this really well actually, where they show like what they do with their clients, interview their clients, bring personality, because obviously usually like they're creative, so they have a lot of personality. So just bring that kind of personality, that sass to the camera. And then if you see something doing well, just put a bit of budget behind it and it's going to start reaching your customers.
Cool. Yeah, I like that because it's really focused on authenticity, you know, and I feel like that's one of the main things that makes these businesses capable of building a brand. And especially with these independent businesses, like I think most of Jena's customers are, is it's really about the individual who's running it. It's like an entrepreneur-driven brand, right? And so super interesting. Someone who's worked with thousands and thousands of beauty professionals, what would you say when people are making that transition to starting a business of their own is something that they typically kind of walk into blind? Like it's a big surprise that hits them. What's something that when they decide that they want to get started, they think, oh, this is going to be easy, or maybe they don't even realize it's going to be a challenge, and then they just get blindsided. You know, it kind of confronts them that way.
I think what they probably won't realize is how much admin is involved. Like I think like the founder curse, and that happens to any businesses. Like we are founders, we know this, like they know this, is it's called almost like the founder tax, is actually the admin that you have to do. Like you end up doing like a lot of the things that nobody else wants to do that you have to do. And I think the way I would approach this, if I was in their shoes, is I would think about how can I outsource this as much as I can. Because a lot of the time when you're like trading your time for money, you're always like a bit cost conscious. You're thinking like, okay, I could do this myself. But I would try to reframe this and say, okay, how long does it take you to do this? And if you paid someone to do this, how many more services can you do and how much more money would you make? If you make more money than what you're actually spending, you should hire someone to do it and you get more clients. And usually once you start getting to a point where you're quite booked, you can start increasing your prices. And that's where the equation doesn't stack anymore. So making sure that you kind of are aware of that founder tax when you start a business. Because when you're employed, everything's done for you, right? You get a salary, like your health insurance is covered, like everything's covered. When you're a founder, you have to do everything yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then when you're hiring people to do these kinds of things for you to kind of help with admin and back office and stuff like that, what are some of the giveaways on like somebody who's not a good hire? Like when you see people make mistakes and they hire the wrong person, like what are the things that they should have picked up on, before getting into that situation?
The way I usually hire is I like to give that person a task as part of the interview process, and I'm happy to pay them for that. That is reflective of what they're going to do. So essentially you hire them maybe for a day or two and you say, can you do this for me? And yeah, you get them to do a task. And the way they do this task is going to be reflective of like who they are and how they work. And you'll see very quickly if it's a good fit or not. So I'm a big believer in like trying before buying.
Kind of almost having like a pilot period. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like sometimes it feels like very harsh, like, fire fast. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying more like just, be respectful. Time is money. You pay that person money. They're going to do something for you, but then you're going to learn, both of you, if that working relationship is going to work, because it's a two-way street.
I feel like one of the challenges that people often get into is they hire their friends in the beginning, and often they sort of have expectations they're going to work really well together, or that they really know and trust their friend implicitly. But then, reality happens and things change. Is that something that you've kind of experienced one way or the other, or seen, beauty businesses do one way or the other, like messy breakups?
I mean, I've had a lot of messy breakups in my business. They were not my friends though, because I've actually purposely tried to avoid doing business with friends. And actually what happened is the people I do business with became my friends as we do business. And I think that's a better way to do it. I think now that I have more experience, I'm more comfortable doing business with friends, because I think my friends, they know, right? When you do business with your friends, especially when you're a bit more mature, like they know that this is like a business relationship, but that the friendship is separate. Avoiding doing business with friends is a good rule. And if you want to break that rule, the way I usually approach it is I give any work commitment a deadline. So you say, we're going to do this for 3 months, and that's it. And if we like it, we might renew. But, the expectation is that we're going to stop. And that way, if things don't work out, you can just drop it.
Yeah. It's kind of built into the contract. Yeah.
Exactly. And otherwise, like just manage expectations before you start working. If you don't want to do that, then you say, okay, look, this is like work relationship. We have to separate the two. It's a bit harder to do in practice. So that's why I like to have this kind of built-in mechanism so it doesn't like pollute.
Yeah, makes sense. What do you think are good reasons versus bad reasons for starting a business? Like if you're a person working at a salon, you've got a great client roster, you've got a good management, the space that you work in is really beautiful. Maybe you feel like you're not keeping a high enough percentage of the profits, or, you just feel like you're ready to take on your own brand or whatever. People have their different reasons for wanting to go out on their own in this industry. What are some of the good reasons and what are some of the bad reasons, would you say?
It's a good question. I think like a good reason to get out is if you're like, I feel like I want to do things my way and I'm being a bit like limited in what I'm able to do here. And I feel like if I did it my way, like I could get, ahead, or I have like a special thing that I want to like put out. So I think like something about like your individuality, your personality is not be flourishing in that space. Like that's a good way to get out on your own. I think if you're extremely talented as well, like keeping a bit more of the upside is probably like is going to be a good motivation. I think like a bad motivation is like, I don't want to have a boss. Things like that. Like I think like ultimately work, not having a boss is one thing, but actually if you're doing it for that, probably you need a boss.
Yeah. I think for me, it's mostly not having a boss, if I'm being honest.
It's a symptom. It's like you have this vision that's what you want to achieve and you feel like you can get more of the upsides, so you want to do it. But it's not like the control of like, I want to be able to work whenever I want. I want to be able to have all that freedom, or I want to work less. Like ultimately you're going to work more. It's going to be harder work. It's going to be like, everything's going to be more difficult.
Totally.
That's what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just joking. That makes sense.
If you think it's going to be easy, like forget about it.
Forget about it. Yeah, forget about it. Okay. And I guess tell me a little bit about how you think the industry is evolving. I mean, I'm sure it's different in Europe versus the US, but do you kind of expect there to be more fragmentation where lots and lots of people kind of go out on their own? Or do you think that people will kind of take advantage of shared infrastructure and really kind of become more, consolidated? How do you kind of see it evolving?
The way I see it, at least in the UK, is I think everyone is going freelance, literally. Like that's what I'm seeing. And there's a few reasons. I think like there's like a more macro reason around like you have social media, you want to promote yourself, you're more individualistic, like being like your own boss is like part of the trend. But I also think there are reasons that are inherent to the UK market, and it's based on how the tax system is structured. Like if you run a salon and you employ a lot of people, you actually get taxed quite heavily. So there's business rates, there's like employment tax, business taxes. And these are things that you don't get as much when you're self-employed because you can work from your home. Maybe you rent a space, so that's baked in. In your rent, so it's like a little bit easier to control. And then you'll be able to like pay less taxes because you're self-employed. So I think like there's also a kind of structural element to the UK, which is also pushing people to go self-employed. So the way I see it is the market is moving very strongly to like people running their own brand, their own personal brand, with their own client base and doing their own thing. Obviously, there's still people who want to be employed, but I think when I go on like job fairs and careers fairs, like 90% of people who haven't graduated want to build their own business.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very similar trend in the US. I mean, I used to work in the med spa space, and there was this very, very strong trend of injectors wanting to leave their established dermatology practices or plastic surgery practices or med spas and build their own business. And I think in that market, there was almost like this regulatory arbitrage that had happened where you needed to be an MD or a dentist or something like that in order to create a med spa. And then after all these telehealth changes happened and you could do a lot of that stuff asynchronously, people decided that they wanted to take advantage of that and go and start their own practices. And so there was this sort of mass proliferation of kind of like solopreneur style small medical wellness businesses. And I think that's just sort of like continued, every single year to get more and more powerful. So
Yes, and I think like that's the trend we're seeing across all industries, if I'm completely honest with you. Especially with the rise of AI, right? You can do more and more on your own because a lot of it is becoming automated. So ultimately, I think like you will have the market's going to get more and more fragmented in certain space, especially in the service industry, because it's a very personal service anyway. So you want to find your guy, you want to find your girl, you want to find your person.
okay, really interesting. So I'd love to now maybe have you teach us a little bit about the economics of a salon. So
Yeah.
maybe we can kind of take it in two phases, sort of like the build-up phase and then the steady state phase. And maybe we can think about it from the perspective of these solopreneurs, who are really not trying to employ a bunch of people, not trying to build a big business. They're trying to build a really good self-sustaining business. Um, so so maybe let's start kind of with the variable costs. So if you're kind of getting up and running, what are your variable costs? Like how much and then what's your variable revenue? Like how much should you expect to generate an income per treatment? How much are your supplies costing? How much does rent cost? What are all the different factors that you need to understand when you're thinking about how much money you're going to make at the end of the day?
Yeah, so I think what you need to think about is like you want to think of a fixed and variable, right? So you have like first of all your investment. So you need to build up your space, and if it's like your home salon or it's a physical salon, you want to think about okay, I need a desk, I need a chair, I need like a lamp to do nails. If I'm like a hairdresser, I need the scissors. So you know all the tools that you need. So you need to buy those tools, and those tools are going to be you're going to use them across multiple treatments. So that's like kind of your fixed cost, and you amortize them.
And how much would that typically cost?
Then you have your. It really depends on the profession, right?
But if let's say you're a
I
hairdresser
think if you're like a nail tech
or a nail tech, yeah, let's do nail tech.
I probably know nails a bit better. Like I think like I'll probably say between £500 and £1,000 to set up, I would say.
So pretty moderate. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a huge investment. I think if you're a hairdresser, like it could be even a bit less, because you have like a blow dry, you have like a few scissors, you have a few things. Like it could be like a few $100s, and you have your kit. Then you need like kind of the room and the space, right? So think about the desk and all of the things. So now we're talking very basic setup. And then you probably want to think about products. So that's where things can quickly stack up based on what you have. So like for a nail technician, like a bottle of gels is like between 10 and 20 pounds, right? So very quickly, if you want to have an offering of like 10, 20, that can start to ramp up quite a lot. So there's like, think about that side of things. And that's like a variable cost. So then you'll have a certain number of applications that you can do per colors, and that you can deduct from your costs. Then you want to also think about your utilities. So there's electricity, maybe even the internet, things like that you then apply as well on each transaction. So you like kind of break it down. So, okay, I'm doing this amount of transaction a month. These are my fixed costs. I break it down per transaction, or even per time I'm working. Maybe like a bigger service gets a bigger chunk of the fixed cost, and then I apply the variable cost to it. And then once you've done that, you also want to think about, okay, how much tax I'm going to be paying? Am I going to be paying like corporation tax? Am I going to be paying maybe even VAT if I'm like big enough? So like think about that, because that's going to obviously catch up with you. And then the final, because also like you're going to pay this at the end of the year. So you're not going to pay straight away. So you're going to say, oh, I'm getting all this money. And then at the end of the year, you do your tax return and you're like, oh, I actually need to pay like, I don't know how much. Yeah, big surprise. So you want to kind of plan for it. You want to know about that and then put it to savings account. And if you can have an interest savings account, you can even make a little bit of money out of it. And then the last thing is you want to also save for what happens if you're sick, because that's the thing, right? When you're like self-employed, there's like no sick pay, nothing. So what happens when you're sick? What if you want to go on holiday? What about your retirement as well? Like if you're young, maybe you don't think about it, but when you get older, like think about that. So think about all these things and say, okay, this is going to be like a percentage of what I make, and I'm going to put that aside and save it aside. And usually there's a good ways of like investing, which are going to actually reduce your other tax bill. So you can kind of set it up nicely to like save on taxes. And then once you have this, then you have like your whole cost base. So you'll see that it starts to add up quite a lot. And then you think about your margins. Okay, how much money do I want to make? So then you add that up at the end of your service, and then you then straight away know, like for an hour service, like I need to be making like 40, 50, at least 60 pounds for this service. And then you start knowing like what is required. So that's how I would kind of run through the economics. And I think like if we were to put numbers on it, like for a manicure, like you need to charge like at least like 40 or like at best 50, 60, like to be able to like make sure you're not paid minimum wage. Like 35 pounds is like you're being paid less than minimum wage.
And so let's say somebody started a nail tech business and they had been up and running for, let's say, a year, and they had really gotten everything working. They had a steady customer base, things were good. Like how much money could they be making?
I think like I'm seeing like good nail techs do anything between like a good one that's like starting her career after a year, like 30, 40K. And if you start being like pretty busy, you can go to 100. Because I think like what then happens when you're fully booked is you start getting pricing power. So you can start actually charging your clients more. And what happens, and you start like training for like bigger services that like, make you more money. You can also start training other people. So you can start making, kind of more money selling courses. So you can start like kind of branching out. So I see like professionals be able to build like small empires for what they do. But I think that when you get started a year in, like, yeah, maybe 50, maybe like 100, if you're like really good and you're able to like sell very well and you're like fully booked, that's probably what I would expect.
Got it. And is that total gross revenue, or is that after all your costs and everything?
Yeah, that'll be gross revenue. Yeah.
Got
gross
it.
Revenue.
And then let's say somebody was doing 50K, they were doing very good. What would it typically be after they've paid out all their expenses and stuff like that?
So probably 50K, like I would say like half will be gone in expenses and taxes, maybe like a bit more, 60%. So you'll keep like the rest. Yeah.
And how much would someone like that make if they were working within a nail salon for somebody else?
I usually pay like minimum wage, so they paid a lot less. So you usually like increase your income by like 50 to 100% if you go self-employed.
Wow.
You set it up right.
Wow. So somebody could go from making like 15K a year, pounds, of of kind of like income on somebody else's payroll to maybe as high as 30 or
like 1,200 a month, maybe 1,500 a month, and you can go to like doing like three a month, 3, 4, and if you're really good, even more. You can do like really well. Like I see like all the pros I work with, and then what then becomes even amazing is that you can then work around your schedule and you can charge a bit more, so then you make a bit more profit, and yeah.
That's incredible. So why would anyone ever work for a nail salon? Why not just go and do this?
So I think when you start out, sometimes there's like confidence issue, like I'm not good enough, so they want to get practice. That's a good way to do it. Sometimes they don't want to worry about it. They just want to have they just want to go to work, do what they love, and not think about all the admin. I think that's like a real point. And I think like if you don't want to do the admin, like I would even argue like, if you're happy with that, like maybe that's the right fit for you. And some that are maybe not very good at promoting themselves and marketing themselves, because that's a skill that you need to learn, and it requires going out of your comfort zone. And if you're not that comfortable, like that can become a blocker.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say somebody's gotten to one successful location and they're saying, "Hey, now why don't I take this recipe and keep cooking it?" So at what point do you feel like it makes sense to make that leap from being like a one location, largely sort of solopreneur style business to, hey, now I'm going to try and take this concept and multiply it?
So I think before you make that decision, and I'm speaking just from the UK market, you want to be really clear that what you're going to do is going to become more of a business owner, an entrepreneur, than like a nail tech or a hairdresser. Like you will do less of the work and you will do more of the business. So that's the first thing you want to think about. If you want to increase your income and you want to stay in the job and still do your job, you could either increase your prices or start selling courses or selling training. That's the best way to like monetize your time in a better way. So because you can actually get like 4, 5, 10 people together at the same time rather than one customer. So I think like if you're thinking about scaling your income, that's probably where I would go if you like the service side. If you're happy with the business side and you want to go and take this show on the road, I think like the good time is like when you start being a bit tired of being behind the chair, behind the desk, where you're like, well, actually, I actually really enjoy the marketing side. I really enjoy doing the social media side. I really like running my little business. That's a good time for you to start creating new locations. And then you can decide, what is the next location? Is the next location a location where I employ the people? Maybe not. Maybe it's a co-working space and you just rent the chair. And that's actually the best of both worlds, because you start to make money and you can monetize it a lot more. And your other users, they retain their own brands. And maybe you can have like a training academy. Maybe you can have like a bunch of different things. And if you want to think about your brand, then you think about like, okay, how does my brand look like? What does it stand for? What are the protocols? What are the ways to deliver the service? And then start like standardizing it and delivering it.
If you had a friend who was, a beauty professional, let's say they were a nail tech, and they were telling you that, they had a business, it was absolutely crushing. It was doing 100,000 pounds a year. They were able to sell at premium pricing. They had other services that they'd added on. And you told them, hey, we think that if you use Jena and use some of these other tools to kind of optimize all of your flows and your processes and your back office, like how much more money do you think that they could make if they did everything perfectly from an operational standpoint?
So we've actually seen this with our users. So usually they would save about, what did they tell me? Like about 5 hours a week. So it's almost like a full working day, because they would usually spend like an hour at least doing admin every day. Like, going back and forth, booking people in, sending reminders and things like that. It's usually a bit more, but like, I would say like, to be conservative, like 5 hours. So you increase like your income by almost like a full working day. So it's like 25% by having the right systems. And on top of that, like if you have a good system like Jena, right, you can have like features that will allow you to optimize the timing. So we have this thing where we only show times that are next to other appointments, so they cluster together. So you get booked back to back instead of having like gaps in your schedule. So there's a lot of things like this that a good system will do. And that it would allow you to actually also grow your business. Like we also have like some insights that we can give you. So we can tell you, okay, this service is not selling. Like maybe scrap it. And this service is selling great. Maybe increase the price. This is your best customer. Maybe like give them a reward. Think about their birthday. This customer used to come every 6 weeks. They haven't come. Like in the past, 2 months, maybe give them a call. Something like that. And I think when you have like these insights, you can like start like running your business a lot more efficiently.
What would you say are like the low-hanging fruit? What are like the 2 or 3 things that, oftentimes you walk into a business and you're like, holy shit, if you just did these 2 or 3 things, like you would get a huge boost in your business or a huge boost in your profits or a huge boost in your marketing. I feel like when you've been in a bunch of these businesses, you kind of like have these things. You're like, oh, you're just not doing this. You're not doing this. This will kind of get you started.
So I think like one is price. Like I will keep repeating this, like increase your prices. Everybody else underpricing, like literally everybody. So just think about this, you're probably underpricing.
You think it's just confidence or they are like afraid they don't have customers or what?
I think it's a confidence thing. It always comes down to confidence because it's about the value that you provide to your customers and you have this relationship with them and you feel like almost like changing the relationship because changing the price is in a way changing the contract. You're cheating. You're changing the rules of the games. But you're not. Yeah, you're not. Like inflation is real. It happens every year. It's eating at your cost. Your cost base is increasing. So it's just normal that you start increasing your prices. So I think that's the first thing. The first thing I would do is like look at your prices and increase your prices. And do that regularly. Do that every 6 months.
You think people will lose customers when they do that? Or if they do, those aren't the right customers?
So there's 2 things. So I think like first of all, if you do it right, you don't lose any customers. So if you say regularly, like every 6 months, I'm going to increase my prices by, I don't know, like a few percentage points. Customers know.
You give them visibility
you can
into it. It's an expectation.
Exactly. You can plan around it. Exactly. Then if customers leave because like you're increasing your prices and they feel betrayed, like they're not the right customer, because which business is never going to increase their prices? You can literally not guarantee that. And then there's like the very rare case of a customer being like, now you're too expensive for me. And then it's a question that you have to ask yourself. Do I really like this customer? And then I can just keep serving her for like a cheaper price. I see people do that and that works for them, right? Because they value the relationship, but everybody else pays the normal price. But if you're like, no, I mean, my time is worth more, then you're like, well, then I'm sorry. And then maybe you find someone else that you can send traffic to.
Yeah. How?
So I guess that's the first thing.
How underpriced do you think people are right now? Like the average person who you talk to, I think you said earlier, 50 or 60 pounds of treatment is sort of what you would think is like a reasonable, good, sweet spot. What are they usually
at? It's a good place, yeah. Most people would charge 40, 45.
Wow. So they could be like 50% underpriced potentially. Just on average.
Yes.
So their revenue right off the bat could increase by 50%.
It depends on like your scale, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it also depends on the scale, right? Like some people are like a bit more junior, so they price a bit lower so they can get the practice. That's fair. I would obviously like encourage that. I think like when you get started, like you probably have like an introduction offer or things like that. So like that's pretty fine. But when you start to be booked and you don't have time anymore, like because you're trading time for money, you only lever is price.
Right. Once you're booked, it's all about the price per hour. That's kind of the magic formula mover.
And I think that ties into like the second thing I'm seeing that a lot of professionals are missing is their personal brand. Like it's really important that you have a very strong personal brand with a very professional and clean website, with a nice Google My Business profile, a lot of reviews. Make sure you post regularly on social media, nice pictures, looking good, because that gives you pricing power. Because then people see you and they're like, wow, this is like a premium shop. She's really good. She's like very in demand. She has a lot of followers. Like they almost feel lucky that they're able to book with you. And that's the position you want to be in. So 1 is price and 2 is your personal brand. If your personal brand is here, your pricing power goes up.
That's super interesting. So in the beginning, when you are not necessarily all booked out, would you recommend that people kind of restrict the availability on their calendars so that it appears as though there's more scarcity?
No, I wouldn't do that. Because I think at the beginning you want as much business as you can. But But what I would do, however, is when you start out, and because you're never very sure, I'll probably start with like a couple of days a week. So I would not start like, especially if you're employed, I would be like, just do 2 days, rent a room, or do it from your house, and build your customer base like that. The rest of the time you do services everywhere. And obviously you're clean with your boss, right? You tell them you're doing this, you're not going to take customers here from there. Like you're doing it the right way. But you build your customer base, you build your brand. And if you start being booked, then you can move. And I've seen a very good example is like a pro that is on my platform. She's been elected like best home salon in the UK. And she was working for like a retailer. She was working at Waitrose. And she started with a few days a week. Like she still had a job. She started doing that. And then she kept moving until she got fully booked. And that way it gives you a lot of confidence. You can try a few things. You can start with like a lower price, build that customer base, build it up, build your salon. Like there's a lot of good things that come with that.
Makes sense. How many customers do you need to have to be like a sort of repeat, consistently booked nail salon? Like if you had 100 people on your, text level friendliness customer list, you're good.
That's more than enough.
That's more than enough. How many do you need? You think?
You don't need more than 100. Like literally,
100's the magic number.
Yeah. Like usually the 100 is usually the magic number. I think. Yeah. If you have like 100 people on your customer list, you'll be fully booked.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. Great.
So it's not like such a big lift, right? It doesn't take that much time.
Yeah. And then I guess just one last question on the personal brand side of it. I feel like a lot of the business owners that I talk to are very nervous because they feel like they're not social media savvy. Like, how important is that? They feel as though, hey, we're not Gen Z, we're not TikTok native necessarily. We're not, able to really do this. What advice would you have for them? Hire somebody, outsource it, or just learn it?
That's a very good question. So I'm going to tell them what I did, because I had to start this journey as well. And I found that the thing that really changed for me is when I hired someone to help me do it. And it doesn't need, what I would do, and sometimes thinking about hiring is like a big thing. I think about like, if you have kids, like if you have like a 16 or 18-year-old, probably they can do it, or their friends can do it. Just find someone who's young, who's on social media regularly, who's good at the platform, and who's willing to learn. Like just get them to like, do your stuff, and they will have the right instincts right away, and they will teach you the things, and just let them lead, let them do the thing. You can look at their profile, look at their page, see if it's doing well. But I think like that's probably the way I would do it. And that forces you, what it did for me is it had this forcing function of like, okay, we're going to record every week, and then we're going to think about the content, and then it just starts happening. Because the problem when you start like this whole new thing of content, I completely get it. Like you have to get in front of camera, then you have to edit the thing, and you have to post the thing. It takes ages. Like you've never done it, it will take you hours. And then the thing's going to get like 3 likes. You'll be like, screw this.
Yeah, totally. It's a very like...
That's rational, right?
That's not a very like sense. Fun thing to go through that first part of the social media strategy journey.
Especially when you don't enjoy it particularly. But then if you hire someone, a 16-year-old or like a 20-year-old who loves this, and they're like, yeah, sure, let's meet up. Like, that's my meeting every week. I do 2 hours. And it's like, yeah, let's shoot this. You do this, you do this. And then start directing you. You do the thing. And then you're like, boom. And then everything happens. And they schedule it for you and it's over.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Awesome, man. Well, let's close it out. So, if you had to give one piece of advice to, emerging beauty professionals, entrepreneurial beauty professionals, what would you give them advice about?
Okay. I think this is like the biggest mistake I've made in my first business. And that's something I see people consistently do wrong, is talk to your customers and listen to your customers and don't put words in their mouth. Make sure you hear what they really have to say. There's ways to ask questions so that you don't influence them. Like the Bomb Test is a very good book for that. Like, make sure you speak to your customers, because that's just going to give you everything you need to grow your business.
Right.
Like they're literally going to give you that.
They'll give you the playbook. Yeah. They'll tell you what you're doing wrong.
They'll give you the playbook. Like they're like, yeah, I like this. I like that. Or like, how did you find me? Like that. Sometimes I speak to my customers like, how did they find you? No idea. Like, how can you not know how people found you? Like, this is the most important question because that's what you can then repeat. So like, just talk to your customers in a natural way. How do you find out about me? Like, what do you like about the service? That's already like too much of an opinion, but like, how did you do it beforehand? Like, things like that. What would happen if, I was not there anymore?
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then if you could go back to the beginning of your founder journey, what's something that you'd do differently? Going back to 2015 or when you started LeSalon.
Yeah, no, I would start LeSalon, but I think like I would talk to my customers.
Oh,
Like,
you would
that's
talk to
something
your
I miss.
customers.
Like,
Oh, yeah, right.
yeah. So I think like what I
Get
did
out of
really
the
wrong,
ivory tower.
and that was like a big mistake. Like I built stuff based on my own assumption. Because you think you know what they want, but you never know. So the marketing messaging was wrong. The product was not right. Like, we were not speaking to them in the right way. Like, just to give you like a very simple example, we assumed that they liked the salon because it was this premium service. So we played on that premium chord for like years. And then I started talking to them. I learned how to speak to them. And it turns out the premium side is not at all important. It's only about the convenience.
It's just the convenience factor.
That was the thing. It was the convenience. Like, yes, I can do it, when my kids are asleep, when this happens. I was like, okay, well, we'd be marketing this so wrong. You like pamper yourself in your home. Blah, blah, blah. This is not at all the message that resonates.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to listen, right? Especially when you're an entrepreneur. You're so nervous. You're just kind of wanting to put words in their mouths so that you hear what you want to hear, But I think sometimes you just got to like open up, just kind of tear the Band-Aid off. That makes sense. And then it kind of becomes fun, actually.
I mean, I love now doing custom interviews. Like, the mom test is like, have you read the mom test?
I haven't read it, but I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. Like, it literally is like a method so that your mom can't lie to you. Because obviously, if you ask your mom, what do you think about this? She'll be like, yeah, this is great. Like, she loves you, right? I mean, most moms. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. But if you can like actually find a framework where even she will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And obviously the jobs to be done and all of that is really helpful for that. So I'll definitely recommend looking into that.
Cool. I love it. All right, man. Well, this was great. I really appreciate it. I think our listeners will really kind of, learn a lot from your insights and we'll definitely get the word out about Jena as well.
Thank you so much, especially in the US. Like, we have a whole market. We have customers in the US.
Great.
Yeah. And if you want to try the system, like, you can. We are operational everywhere.
Amazing. Okay. All right. See you, Jean-Michel. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Made Locally. If you found this useful, share it with another business owner who's in the trenches like you. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. And if something stood out, I'd love to read your comments. See you in the next episode.